It is a great honor and a privilege to introduce Robert and Birgit Fischermann. We're here in your beautiful home in Glassman, and you both are from Denmark. So Robert, if you could mention a little bit about your family and your roots, and also a little bit about your wife's family.
My mother was born in Poland, my father in Latvia, and before the First World War, they left. The young men had to, under Russian rule, to be enrolled in the army for 25 years. So Jews fled. And they came to Sweden, and from Sweden they came to Denmark. And my parents they were married in Denmark, and we were 6 children. And when the Germans occupied Denmark, and it was on April the 9th in 1940. Right, Theresienstadt? Yeah. There were no persecutions against Jews in Denmark.
How old were you when the Germans...
I was 15.
15.
And there are several reasons for that. First of all, the Germans looked at the blonde and tall Danes as Aryans, as the Germans. They wanted a good connection with Denmark because of the supply of food from Denmark to Germany. And the Germans knew that the Danes were against the persecution of Jews.
They knew.
They knew it. The only thing they demanded was a yellow patch. But then the Danish king, Christian X, said, okay, then I will wear it too.
This was the Star of David.
And then they gave in.
So you never wore it? You never wore it? There was no yellow Star of David?
No. So we went to the Jewish school, and we lived like any other Dane. As I said, no persecution of Jews. There were a Jewish school for girls, Jewish school for boys. And there were very many sabotages against Germany in Denmark. And in 1943, the Germans demanded capital punishment for sabotage. And then the Danish government stopped working with the Germans. Now, the one in charge of the Germans in Denmark was Werner Best. He was a very problematic person. He really didn't want the Jews to be persecuted, on one hand. On the other hand, there were a lot of competitions between the German captains. And to please Hitler, Werner Best wrote a letter where he wrote to Hitler, now it's time to arrest the Jews in Denmark. It was actually not his intention, but because of the petition he did it. We had family in Norway, in Narvik. That was my cousin, and she was married and had 2 small children. And when the Germans occupied Denmark, the Danes didn't resist. The Germans arrived in Denmark with very strong vehicles, Panzer, and the Danish soldiers, they were riding on bicycles. So there was no idea of trying to fight the Germans. It was a hopeless task. So in Norway, the Norwegian fought the Germans, and Norway was conquered by the Germans after Denmark was conquered. So the Germans were very harsh against the Jews. They arrested the men and the grown-up children. But she was allowed to stay, and at a later stage, she managed to get to Sweden. But she never saw her husband again. There was a German who was responsible for shipping in Denmark. His name was Dukvich, and he knew about Hitler's plan to arrest the Jews on Rosh Hashanah. The Germans knew that the Jews would be at home at Rosh Hashanah. So in advance they went to the Jewish community and asked to get all the names and addresses of the Jews. And in that way, they could go to everyone and pick them up. In the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, the rabbi knew from Dukvich about the plans of Hitler, so he told in the synagogue that people shouldn't stay at home, but go to Christian friends and stay there until they could get to Sweden. And my bigger sister, my bigger brother, because of the experience with the Norwegian Jews, they left home. I don't know where they went. And we went to Christian friends. I had a little sister, she was 11. She suffered from epilepsy. And during the night, she got a terrible attack. And my father wouldn't like to bother the Christian friends. So he decided, unfortunately, that we should go back home and the next morning call a doctor. So we left, and at 5 o'clock in the morning, somebody was knocking on the door to our apartment, and a harsh voice said, "This is the German police, open the door." So we realized that they were actually coming to pick up our father. So my brother, who is a year and a half younger than I am, we took as many sheets as we could find, bound them together, and let my father down from the fourth floor by means of sheets. And on the other side of the apartment, there was a balcony, and there we tied the sheets. And my father went down. When we opened the door, 5 Germans, armed Germans, came in. They rushed in with a Danish collaborator. And they ran around the apartment and found the sheets. So they realized that our father fled. So the one in charge took my brother, my younger brother, together with 2 Germans, and they went down to look for my father. Now, when my parents wanted to talk together without we knowing what they were talking about, they spoke Yiddish, very similar to German. And in that way we learned Yiddish. So I knew exactly what the German told them. They told the 2 Germans, the one in charge, go down and find my father. If they find him and he starts to flee, then shoot him. I just hoped that my mother didn't hear that. So they came back, and they told us to dress and take valuables, bank accounts, and they took us to a lorry downstairs and took us to a German boat in the harbor of Copenhagen. The name of the boat was Verdeland. And when we got on board, we saw about 200 Danish Jews were already captured. We were looking for our father, couldn't find him. So we didn't know what happened to him. And the Germans took us to Theresienstadt in Czechoslovakia. And there we were taken to a barrack. We were told to take off our clothes, and all the hair was raised, and we had to deliver all electric equipment. The only thing we were allowed to keep was wedding rings. And then after a while we were sent into the camp. Now the camp was a military camp built by Caesar Joseph Assini as a military camp. It was surrounded by a wall and earth around, so it was very easy to guard. And the people who guarded us were Czech soldiers. They were forced to do it by the Germans. And it was very easy to defend. So we, as Danes, we realized, but only after the war, that there was an agreement with Germany and Denmark that Danish Jews would not be transported from Theresienstadt. The Germans turned the Theresienstadt into a transit camp where about 144,000 Jews from Europe were sent to the death camps in Poland. And the Germans promised that we wouldn't be sent there. So we had three big problems. First of all, sicknesses. There were a lot of sicknesses. There were lots of transports eastwards, and in the beginning we didn't hear anything from the camps. Later on we realized that they were death camps. And the third thing was, when will it be our turn to go eastwards? Only after the war we knew the agreement between Germany and Denmark. So we got a card with 31 dates for food, and the only food we got was actually soup, a terrible looking soup made of potato peels. And then once a week we got half a loaf of bread, a little bit of sugar and margarine. So people were undernourished. And everyone from the age of 15 had to work. And I got different works. I was a messenger boy, and I was, together with my brother, we were taken to the railway stations when the Germans organized transport from the camp. The Germans could ask for the names of 1,000 Jewish prisoners. And maybe you can imagine when people got the message that they had to turn up and take their belongings with them, that they went to a board of 10, they called it Ældsterådet, the elderly people. One of them was the chief rabbi of Denmark. And we had, my brother and I, we had to help the people with their luggage. And another thing, we had to carry sacks of coal on their back, our backs. But the worst thing was to help the poor people when they were transported from the camp. We knew a man who had a certain influence. The camp Theresienstadt was organized by these 10 people, elder people, and they had to fulfill every order from the Nazis. We had better conditions than other prisoners, the Danes. We were living 3 families in one big room, without partitions. So you can imagine the tensions under these conditions. In the background, a family lived there. The name was Choleva, and they had children at the age of 12, 13, 14. In the middle, an elderly couple, Schwarz, and in the front, my mother with 4 children. Now, the Germans realized that they would lose the war. And not because they turned into human beings, but they allowed the leader of the Swedish Red Cross, Folke Bernadotte, from the royal king's house in Sweden, to rescue Jews and non-Jews from camps and prisoners in Germany in order to get better conditions when they had to give in to the Allied. We asked Bernadotte, well, I have to tell, there was in Germany, there was a Red Cross camp, a Swedish one and a Danish one. The Danes had buses that was driven with an aggregate with wood, not petrol. And the tires were terrible. The Swedish had good tires, and they were fueled with petrol. So that when it came to save us from Theresienstadt, Bernadotte refused. He said he didn't want to disturb the conditions, the good conditions they had with the Germans. So he didn't want to save us. It was the Danes who saved us. They organized the whole thing. They provided us with food. And the Danish Red Cross asked the Swedish Red Cross if they could use their buses. The problem was that they were white buses with a very big red cross on the roof. And the English knew that the Germans used these buses to transport war material and German soldiers. So we could expect that they would attack the Swedish Red Cross buses. So on April the 13th, in 43,
I 43 blev vi. Der kom I til Theresienstadt. I 43.
Yeah, in 45.
I foråret 45.
Yeah. It was in the spring of 45. Everyone who was going to leave Theresienstadt eastwards got a note. And this was one of the things we were afraid of every day in the camp. When will we get such a note? And then the note came. And it was written in German that we had to turn up with our luggage at a certain place in Theresienstadt in order to leave the camp. And we thought that was the end. That was exactly what we were afraid of every day for a year and a half. It was on the 13th of April. No Swedish bus were coming. On the 14th, no bus. Only on the 15th, the Swedish buses arrived. In the meantime, in Theresienstadt, people could meet. And some Danes made friends with Czech people. And strange enough, the Danish chief rabbi, as we knew that we were to leave Theresienstadt and get to Sweden, that he asked the Germans if he could marry the Jews with some of the Czechs. And they allowed it. And so they were saved. So on the 15th of April, the buses arrived. And I remember the strange feeling I had going up into the bus. I had no idea what was going to happen to us. And we knew we couldn't trust the Germans. At a certain stage, the Germans took about 360 young Czech people to extend the camp, places to overnight and water supply. And they promised these young people and their parents that they wouldn't be sent eastwards. They didn't keep their promise. So we started driving northwards. In every bus was an armed German soldier. He was sitting in the front and looking forward. The windows were closed with curtains, and it wasn't allowed us to look out. But when we started northwards, and we came to the place before Berlin, I opened the curtains and I saw a total outbombed Germany. Only here and there I saw a church. All the other buildings were bombed. So suddenly we heard an alarm, and the buses hurried into a forest. And we thought now then, well, on the way to freedom, we would be killed because we could hear the English bombers. But fortunately, nothing happened to us. We got some biscuits from the Swedish drivers. And then we continued till we came to the Danish border with Germany. And there I saw something that I'll never forget in my life. We saw Danes on both sides of the roads we were passing. We opened the windows and they threw in cigarettes and sweets. We saw people working in the fields. It was a very positive thing, very positive. And all along the road, Danes were standing with a Danish flag and shouting, "Welcome home." It never happened any other Jewish group occupied by the Germans. It only happened in Denmark. So we came to the E, where Hans Christian Andersen was born. And there we got the first proper meal in more than a year and a half. But it was too much for our stomach, and all of us got sick. We stayed there in a school, and the next day we were taken by the buses to Copenhagen, and from there with a boat to Sweden. Sweden had agreed to accept the Jews. The first thing we got was a shock, because the Swedish soldiers in the town Malmö, they wear green uniforms, the same as the Germans. So we thought that we were going to die. But we were surrounded by a fence. They didn't let people close to us because we might have sicknesses. So in order not to spread that, we were taken in isolation. We got a bath, we got clothes, clean clothes. And after 6 weeks in Theresienstadt, we started getting postcards from my sister in Sweden. So we understood that my older brother, and my father were alive in Sweden. And it was a great strength to know that they were alive. The packages we got with food from Denmark was not from the Red Cross. The leader of the Red Cross, he didn't think that it was the job of the Red Cross to provide food for the prisoners. And when the packages arrived, several things were stolen.
These were the packages in Theresienstadt?
We got it in Theresienstadt. But the food wasn't kosher. And the chief rabbi said to people that it is Sharat Cherum, and it was allowed to eat non-kosher food. But some religious people refused, and most of them died. So,
was it because of starvation?
Yeah. Så then, så skulle vi hjem. Yeah. The transport of the Danish Jews from Theresienstadt was not organized by Folke Bernadotte, the leader of the Swedish Red Cross. As I told, he didn't want to spoil the connections he had to the Nazis. So the Danes organized everything. They organized the transport from the Red Cross camp in Germany. The Danes got an allowance from the Swedish captain to use the Swedish buses. And we started driving northwards. And then finally we came to the Danish border. As I told you, people were standing on both sides.
And what date was this when you got to Denmark?
It was the 15th of April.
So the war hadn't ended yet?
Jeg har været den 15., 16. og 17. april, ikke? 17. og 18. april.
Yeah. We were expecting the buses on the 15th, 16th, 17th. It only came on the 17th. And then we were taken to Denmark, stayed overnight. As I told you, we got the first proper meal. Next day we were taken to Sweden. And
can I ask, why didn't you stay in Denmark? Why did they take you to Sweden?
Because the Germans didn't want the Jews to mix with Christians in Denmark.
Even though they knew they were losing the war, even though it was near the end, right near the end.
Now, When the Germans realized that they were losing the war, they released prisoners, as I told you, to get better conditions when they had to give in to the Allied. And we came, the next day we came to Malmö, the city in Sweden, and we stayed in Sweden until the end of May, when the Germans gave in. And then we were released. We came back to Denmark. The Danish government, they found an apartment to us. And my mother was rather strong, relatively strong, in Theresienstadt. And when we came to Denmark, we were taken to a school where we stayed a short time until the government found an apartment for us.
When did you first reunite with your father and your brother and sister? Was it in Sweden when you got to...
No. When we got into the apartment in Denmark.
Nej, i Sverige fik jeg at vide, at din far og bror var druknet.
Og det er i Sverige?
Det var i Sverige.
Ah, yeah. When we came to Malmö, and we were fenced in, we looked at people. I was alone with my younger brother. My mother and the smaller children, they were separated from us. And we noticed that people were looking at us, pointing at us, and whispering. And then Fusoleva, who was with us together in Theresienstadt in this big room, she came to us and said, I've just heard that one of my close family is dead. Now I can tell you that your father and your older brother, when they tried to escape to Sweden, they drowned on the way. If we had been together with my mother, we could have maybe helped her. But we were taken to a certain camp in Sweden to get food and to get strength. And only later on we were together with the rest of the family. And my mother had changed in such a way that we could hardly recognize her. And then we got the apartment in Denmark after a certain time in a school there. When we went into the apartment, my mother broke down totally, and she was crying every day for 6 months. My sister couldn't stand it, my older sister. So she left.
She's the sister that had gone to Sweden.
Yeah.
She didn't go to Theresienstadt. She was saved.
She was saved.
Can I just ask, how was the reunion when you saw your sister again? When you actually met her again, and when your mother met your sister?
We were crying, simply crying.
It must have been incredibly emotional.
Yeah. You were crying.
Where did you meet her first? Was it?
We met her
Hvad spurgte han om?
Hvor vi mødte Fanny.
I Møllefærdig.
Var det i Danmark?
Nej, i Sverige.
Sverige. We met her in Sweden, yeah.
And your mother must have been for your mother and for all of you the most emotional to see your sister.
We went to the school, and when the government had found an apartment for us, came in, my mother collapsed totally. She didn't function. And in the first 6 months, she tried to commit suicide by opening the gas valves in the kitchen, closing all the windows. I was 17. I never had any connections with the government office. We needed a social worker to help us, but there was no such a thing. And I came home from school, and I could smell the gas. And I understood that I shouldn't ring the bell. It could cause an explosion of the gas. So I opened the door and found my mother sitting in a chair, the windows closed and the gas valves open. I hurried, closing the gas valves. I took my mother and rushed her to the I opened the window and rushed her, and she woke up. And I didn't know what to do. I said to my mother, "Do you think our father would have done such a thing that you have tried to do?" She didn't answer. She was silent for a long time. And I realized that she understood what I had said. Yeah.
And bigger.
Yeah. I was 17. One of the first things I had to do was to bring my sister. She was at that time 13 years old, to a hospital for treatment.
She was the epileptic.
I never had a connection with any government officer, but I managed to bring her to a hospital a little bit far from our apartment. And every time I visited her, she pleaded me, take me home. But I couldn't take that responsibility. I had to see that my brother started to learn a job. My youngest brother was 7 years old. He had to go to school. When there was a meeting with the parents, I had to go there. What did I know? A boy of 17 at that time. He was a child. So I had to take care of my own education too. And my sister got better, and she was sent home. Then it got worse, and she had to go back. And it happened several times. The attack means that her body cramped, and we had to see that she didn't bite her tongue. And she was in a room with an elderly woman who was shouting all the time. And he pleaded me every time I went there to take her home. It took 4 years. I was alone 4 years. And then I met Birgit.
Can I just ask, with your sister in Theresienstadt, in Theresienstadt. Did she have any attacks ever in Theresienstadt?
She had the attack in Theresienstadt.
So it's amazing that she survived Theresienstadt.
But she had no medicals, because it wasn't allowed to bring in medicals.
So it's a miracle that she survived in Theresienstadt. It's a real miracle.
Yeah. Then
how did you support how did the family have money for food and?
My mother got an allowance, and I started school, and I got.
Du arbejdede.
Yeah, I worked in the post office 3 times a week. Once 8 hours sorting letters. Terrible job. But we managed. My mother got an allowance. Then one day we saw that my sister, who had epilepsy, had taken an overdoses of sleeping pills. Where she got them from, I don't know. We ordered an ambulance. They were taken to the hospital. They were treated, and they sent her home. She was very exhausted when she came home, and she went immediately to bed. The next morning I went to see how she was. She was lying in her bed. She looked very calm, very relaxed. She was dead.
But you did everything you could. You did everything humanly possible.
I was alone with all the problems for 4 years, till I met my wife. Yeah. On the other hand, I was born an optimist, and we have had a very good life together.
Fortæl om Wiesenthal.
Huh?
Om Wiesenthal.
Yeah. We were in a camp in Germany, and every day morning we were taken out of the camp to a nearby hospital to help there in the hospital. One of the prisoners was Simon Wiesenthal. He wrote a book about the Chamaniot, the sunflower. And he tells that one day a nurse came to him and asked him to follow her. And she went to a young SS officer who was fatally wounded by a hand grenade. And he told Wiesenthal that he and other Nazis had they caught Jews and led them into a building, locked the building, and threw in hand grenades. So some of the...
Det begyndte at brænde.
Huh?
Det begyndte at brænde.
It started burning, and then some of the Jews preferred to jump to their death from the windows instead of burning alive. Yeah, and then a nurse came to Wiesenthal and brought him to this young officer, Nazi officer, who told him what he had done.
De havde,
When they
da de sprang ud af vinduet.
when they jumped out of the window, they shot them. They shot the Jews. This young officer told Wiesenthal that what he did, he knew he was going to die. He asked him to visit his mother and tell her that he had been a good boy. He asked Wiesenthal, in the name of the murdered Jews, to forgive him. And Wiesenthal wrote a book about it, where he wrote that he was convinced that this German officer really regretted what he had done. But could he forgive him in the name of murdered Jews? Wiesenthal left this young officer without an answer. According to my opinion, no one can forgive a person in another person's name.
Han skrev i sin bog til de her præster og biskopper og fortalte dem, og de skrev, hvad de mente.
Yeah. The book he wrote, he sent to different religious people, bishops, priests, and asked them what he thinks he should have done. And there were very different answers. One wrote, as a Christian, when somebody hit your cheek, turn the other cheek, turn. And other things. And Wiesenthal was convinced that he did the right thing not to answer this German officer.
The camp that you were in Germany, was this before you were taken to Denmark? Was it? Did you go there from Theresienstadt?
The camp in Theresienstadt. We were taken to the camp in Theresienstadt from Denmark, direct from Denmark.
And then from Theresienstadt, did you go to this camp in Germany?
Yeah, I told you that the Germans knocked at the door and asked us to dress. They took us to a lorry downstairs, took us to the boat where 200 Jews were gathered, and then they took us to Germany, or to Czechoslovakia.
But when you met Wiesenthal yourself?
I didn't meet him, but he wrote a book and I read the book he had written. On every German soldier's grave, a sunflower was planted. No Jew got a sunflower on his grave.
So I think there's so many where there are no graves. There we don't have the graves.
And even if there was a grave, but the Germans did the most terrible things you can imagine, or you can't imagine. By the Nuremberg process, there was a judge who wrote a book. It was a statistic of what the Germans had done to the Jews. I read the book. It's unbelievable. unbelievable. I can mention only one thing. German soldier had his boy at birthday, small boy. So the German soldier took doves and threw it up in the air and shot them to entertain his son. But there were many, many other things. The judge, one of the judges, I don't remember his name.
Han hed et eller andet med Liverpool.
I forgot his name. No, it's not important. Who wrote this statistic? And his intention was to publish it. And then the other judges said, you can't publish it.
No, it was the judges from Nuremberg.
In connection with the Nuremberg process.
And you can't publish it.
And they said to him, the other judges, you can't publish it, it's too...
Lord Russell of Liverpool.
What?
Lord Russell of
Lord
Liverpool.
Russell of Liverpool, yeah. It was Lord Russell of Liverpool. You can't publish it, it's too terrible. And they said, if you publish it, you can't go on being a judge in the process. He decided to publish it. And I read the book. It was more than horrible.
Can I ask, what happened to the rest of your family?
My brother, who is a year and a half younger than I am, is still alive in Denmark. My little sister committed suicide. My big sister, she died. And
Hun blev 94.
yeah, she got 93, 94.
And where did she live in Denmark?
She lived in Denmark. But she also had a terrible life. He was married, by the way, to a non-Jewish. He's a very nice fellow. He worked by the railways, and he got a plot where he built a summer house. And he went there. He was very fond of gardening. And my sister, who in Sweden was alone, she didn't know if she would see her mother and her sisters and brothers anymore.
She was 19.
She was 19 years old. It was a terrible, terrible situation. No one can imagine it if they haven't been in such a situation themselves. One day he did come back from the garden, so she went down to look for him. Downstairs, there was stairs down to the cellar. There he was lying, dead.
And did they have a family?
Yeah, 2 children.
And are you in touch with the children? You have a...
Not very much, but I am now and then. Yeah. So that is more or less
And
my
can I ask
story.
then, what happened with your mother? Did she...
My mother got sick and she went to the hospital, underwent an operation and didn't survive.
Oh, such sorrows.
So since I was 15, I didn't have a father.
You
You
became...
can imagine the person she was, his mother, at the hospital. When she was dying, she said to the nurse, "Sei gesund."
Tihibuya.
Tiefria.
That was
To the
That was her
nurse.
last
the
words.
last
Her
words.
last words. Wow. Sei gesund.
But when I came to the hospital to visit her, she recognized me.
So Baruch Hashem, you met your beautiful wife. How did you meet? And you've been married for over 70 years.
It was
It's a big-
common for young people to go on holiday on bicycle and overnight in youth hostels. And when you came to a youth hostel, you had to write your name, and when there was a Jewish arrangement, and we came there, we saw people, young people. We didn't know them really, but you know them by face. And when we came to the youth hostel in the other end of Denmark, and we had to write our name, we saw two names of two Jewish girls. One of them was Birgit, another was her friend, girlfriend, and they were 15 and I was 17.
Certain.
And the girlfriend's parents didn't want these girls to be alone, so they sent her brother, a younger brother, to be the policeman. Yeah.
Du må godt fortælle, hvad min far sagde til mig.
Then we started going out together, and then I was invited home to Birgit's parents. And her father said, "You shouldn't
Don't play with him.
don't play with him. He is a very serious person." And she said, "Yes, but he is so old."
I was 17 and he was 21.
So that's 4 years is nothing, but in those, when you're at that age, wow.
Yeah. I remember one day I went there and my mother-in-law, she made sandwiches, open sandwiches, a big plate. And then the telephone rang and she was talking and talking and talking. When she came back, there was a lot of sandwiches. They were all gone.
Why?
She said, "Where are my sandwiches?" "Ah, it was also meant for you."
Wow.
But she was all right. And also Birgit's father.
And when did you decide to get married? Was it soon?
I had to study for 5 years at the technical high school in Denmark.
And what did you study?
engineer, building engineer. Mainly installations, especially hospital installations. And we couldn't marry before I finished the studies and began to earn money. So we decided to wait 5 years.
But you were engaged, or you were?
Yeah.
So how long have you known each other? It must be.
We met each other at the Jews hostel. She was with her girlfriend.
In what year? Do you remember the year?
49.
Yeah.
49.
And 5 years later, in 54, we got married.
And can I ask you, your family, the whole family was taken to Sweden?
Yes. No, my grandfather, my mother's father, was in Theresienstadt.
He was also in Theresienstadt.
And when he came back, he died a short time after.
He got sick in Theresienstadt. They had a sort of a hospital. And I would say the funny thing, of course it wasn't funny, because my mother was very depressed. But one day she said, now something happened to him, and that must have been the day he was hospitalized in Theresienstadt. She could feel it.
She had like a premonition.
Yeah.
Amazing. And that's the day that he got sick.
But he came. It was very interesting also. He had, in Denmark, he had a factory for shoes. And when we came back from Sweden, we went into the hospital to visit him. Now, I have an older sister. She's 3 years older than I am. And we went to the Danish school in Gothenburg, and she was just about having her examination at that school. But we went back to Denmark, and she stayed in Sweden to go to the examinations. So she came maybe some days, a week, I don't remember exactly, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks later. She came to Denmark. When we came in, my father, my mother, my younger sister, and me, we went in to visit my grandfather. And he looked at us. First he said we had to go a little bit further away, and he looked down to look to see what kind of shoes we were wearing. And then he said, where is Leia, my sister? And when he heard that she was okay, she would be coming. But I think it's very interesting, very moving, that how he was thinking also with the shoes and about my sister. Then we had a very special thing happen to my youngest sister. When we came back to Denmark, she was 3 years old. When we fled, she got an injection so she shouldn't cry. When we were walking down to the harbor, to the boat.
How old are you?
Well,
how old were you when you were walking to the harbor?
I was 11 years old, and she was 1.5. In Sweden, every time my parents got a flat, and my father got work, and every time somebody was knocking at the door, she was hiding somewhere on the other side of a chair, or on the other side of an open door, or somewhere. She was hiding. She was 2.5 years old. When we came back to Denmark, she was my parents bought a house with a garden, And every day after lunch, she was outside in the garden in a chair, having her nap. She was like you can imagine if you are reconvalescent. That was her. But she stopped. The moment we came back to Denmark, she stopped hiding.
Gee, it's amazing.
She didn't know anything.
Wow. Do you remember going in the boat? You remember going in the boat from Denmark to Sweden? You remember when you were taken in the boat?
Yes, I remember it.
You were with your whole family?
Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to know if I really remember or that what I was told, because people, our family was talking about it and I was listening. I think I remember, I really don't know.
You were on the way to the harbor.
On the way to the harbor, yes.
And your bigger sister, she's not alive anymore. She went into another taxi. And then when they saw that, they hurried and took her out of the taxi. So she came with them to Sweden. This taxi was stopped by the Germans.
Really? What a miracle.
Yeah,
there are very many sad things about it. But as I said, we have had a good life.
And can I just ask, what message do you both give?
What?
If I had to ask you, what message would you give to the future generations? Because you've both witnessed such difficulties and you really have. You've gone through tremendous losses, harrowing experiences. But look, you're both happy and you're here in Israel. But what message would you give to the future generations? Could you impart, or what message would you think of?
What do we used to say?
the family is the most important thing.
Yeah. What was I going to say? Hvad er det, jeg plejer at sige?
Familien er det vigtigste.
Ja, men ikke bare det. Men,
ja, hvis der er nogen, der spurgte om det ville kunne ske igen, det med Holocaust.
no, ja, det. Yeah. Oh, that's another thing. If people would ask me if what happened at that time could happen again, I wouldn't dare to say no.
Really?
So this is one of the reasons that we went to Israel to live.
It's very sad. They say in Malmo has become a very, very militant. It's not safe for Jews to walk around in Malmo, in Sweden.
Today,
it's very dangerous.
it's difficult. There are so many Palestinians.
And how long have you been living in Israel?
Since 72.
Since 72. And can I just ask, and this is a difficult question, but because of your experiences and your harrowing, and I mean what you saw, but you saw also the good. You saw how the Danes, look how the Danes helped the Yin, how they, unbelievable. They're one of the only nations on this earth that really helped the Yin.
The only nation of all the nations that the Germans occupied.
Yeah, that's right.
And they endangered their own lives by helping Jews getting to Sweden.
If I had to ask you your faith, did you keep your emunah or?
No.
It's a difficult question.
Before the war, no, it's not. It's easy for me to answer. Before the war, I went to the synagogue every Saturday. It was quite a long way to walk. And there I met my uncle. He lived not far from the synagogue, so after the service we went there. And Motzei Shabbat, I walked home. When we came back from Theresienstadt, and I heard that the Germans, and let me put it in that way, we went to the Jewish school. There we were taught that God knows everything. He is a good and mercy God. And I accepted that. I always wear a kippah. When we came back from Theresienstadt, and I was told that the Nazis had murdered 1.5 million Jewish children only because they were Jewish, I gave up my faith. I don't believe in a God. I took off my kippah, and that's it. If God knows everything, if He is a good and a mercy God, how could He allow that? He can't be a mercy God. There's no God. That's an invention, people's invention.
Look, you came to live in Israel, you live here, it's a miracle this country exists.
We have a religious family. We have the chief rabbi's son is married to Birgit's sister.
It's Malchior.
Malchior.
And they invite us to Shabbat. They know we are driving a car, and they accept it. And then, you wash your hands. That's a good thing, to wash your hands before you eat. And then you don't talk till you have that wine and a piece of bread. So if you want to have the attention of somebody, you say,
Another question which I know it's very hard for us to understand, and a lot of rabbis that I know have never questioned and they've never given answers because there are no answers. But somebody once said something to me which had such a profound, they said, we was man. We all ask we was God, but we was man. We was mankind. We was the most cultured country on earth, could have perpetrated the most inhumane, and we was man. We was mankind.
We
So
was made in the image of God.
it's very hard, and
So how can there be bad people?
it's a question we grab. We'll only know. There's no one can really answer. It's a question that there are no answers. There really are no answers.
Oh, now I know the answer. You should make it different between good things and bad things.
It's a beautiful message. It's a very, very
And you
beautiful.
look at the half full cup and not at the half empty cup.
Oh, that's really very special. So I just want to thank you both. If I can just come in.
You're welcome.
I'm just going to come in here. I really want to, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you both so much for, this has been the most, there are no words, there really are no words, and I just cannot thank you enough for just everything, for telling me about what happened. I know it was very difficult, but you both are so, it's amazing to see what you went through and how you've come out. And Baruch Hashem, you should just have Mazel and Brocha and Admei V'Esrim in good health, and you should have, and I'll say it with all of Hashem's blessings, please God, because you deserve it, you both do. And it's a miracle. I think your life is a miracle and your life is a miracle.
Yeah.
And I think we have to believe. If you don't have belief, then I don't know. But the questions, and sometimes there just aren't answers. And there's no one can give an answer. Why 1.5 million children, I was in Poland, and there are no answers, really. But I know that somebody who came after the Shoah to America and he had nothing, the only thing he had was hope. And I think that's what that keeps us, is we have emunah, we have hope.
Yeah. But I always say you should differ between important things and less important things.
Yeah. And good things and bad things.
Carry about the important things, not the less important things.
Well, thank you so, so much. I cannot thank you enough.
I say, as long as there are people claiming that it didn't happen with the 6 million Jews, I have decided that every person who asks me to give witnesses, I will do it. I do it with the American joint. I had made a testimony for 300 people, and I have a date for another meeting. So what they do, they come to Jerusalem, they send a taxi and pick us up and bring us back again.
And have you ever done the video where somebody's videoed what we've done now?
Yes, they do the video. I've also written a book in Danish, and we have a friend from England. I translated my book from Danish to Danish English, and he translated into English.
Right. It's so important, because unfortunately there's so many deniers, there's so many people. Thank you so much. You've given testimony in many times in Germany. You've been to Germany a few times?
Yeah, a few times.
Was it difficult to go to Germany?
No, because these are other people. It's not an artist. And I have lectured, and I have told them every German, we are guides, we are authorized guides. We have been guiding for 30 years. And every German group I have guided, I told them that I have been in a concentration camp. And they have a responsibility to see that it never happened again.
And where do you guide?
I guide in Israel.
You take tours, you take groups?
I take buses, go by buses.
Wonderful.
And visit all over Israel.
And it's true, never again. This can never happen. It should never happen again. Wow.
And there is a saying, to understand is to forgive.
Yeah.
Simon Wiesenthal, as I told you, he realized that this young Nazis really regretted what he had done.
Yeah.
And Simon Wiesenthal was convinced that he was honest when he said it. So I wrote my memories, and I called it "To Understand Isn't Necessary to Forgive."
Sure.
Please.
I survived. Wow. This is to understand does not mean to forgive. I survived Theresienstadt. Sure. This is amazing.
Well, I'll show you.
Can you show some of the pictures?
Yeah.
Wow. This is so beautiful. This is incredible.
Jeg tror, alle billederne er bagved.
And have you ever been back to Theresienstadt?
Yeah.
Was it difficult when you went back?
Yeah, but I'll never do it again. What do you think about this couple?
That is so beautiful. Sure. Wow, that is. And how many years have you been married?
Since 54.
You have another.
At that time we were young and beautiful.
Wow, and you still are.
Now
this is
you're not young anymore.
Can you show some of the pictures? 'Cause
Yeah.
it's so.
This is the family.
He was your father.
This is my father.
How did the picture survive?
When the last German left our apartment in Copenhagen in 43, they left the door open. And neighbors came in and stole whatever they could carry away, except photos.
Which is the most important.
And this is my oldest sister, my mother. That's me, my younger brother, Rebecca.
Can I just bring this closer? This is so special. And this is with your brothers and sisters and...
Yeah.
And these are the Swedish Red Cross buses.
The what?
The Swedish Red Cross buses that the Danish organized. You have a picture of the buses, but the Danish were the ones that organized. And this is, wow. Wow, that's a wow, what a beautiful picture when you got married. The whole family. Oh, this is... So you know what they say with the family? The family is the revenge. The revenge is the children and the grandchildren. That
What?
The revenge, the best revenge is one's family.
Yeah, that's right. I used to express it in that way. Hitler didn't manage. And this is the family.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
We have 8 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren.
All I can say is Baruch Hashem, it's wonderful.
and another one on the way
Yeah.
in December.
So you should just be blessed with just nachas, and
Yeah.
thank you so much. What a beautiful book.
Yeah.
And it's so important
That's
what
for
you've
you.
done. Oh, thank you so much. And it's such a special title. To understand does not mean to forgive. Wow. Thank you both so very much. Very
You're
much.
welcome.